Have you ever been confused how grudges work? Well, you're not alone. This video is going to serve to show you everything that you need to know to 100% Age of Reckoning near enough every time, because you know exactly how the grudges are calculated and you can play around that. To give an example of how grudges scaled, we can see Imric here on turn 1. We can see he has 5 grudges. This is nothing but an algae scheme. As you see, it's elf actions. But that's not what we're interested in. When dwarven armies or settlements get attacked, their grudges values increase by 30, which means when Imric attacks Gilbert Helheim and attacks the Bone Gulch, he's going to increase his grudges by 60. And also to this, dwarven casualties equals 2 per 1000 KP kill value. So depending on how much combat power is within this army, it'll gain 2 per 1000. So at the very end of this fight, we're going to expect Imric to gain quite a lot of grudges because he's fighting against dwarves. So keep in mind, it's not bespoke to your own faction. This could be any dwarf on the map. Next up, it's important to mention broken treaties are 45 grudges, war declaration is 75 grudges, positive diplomacy is a minus amount of grudges, and peace is a minus amount of grudges as well, roughly about minus 70 grudges. And now for the settlements and how they scale with grudges. So per the occupation, sack and raising, every single one of them scales with the tier of the settlement. So the higher the tier, the more grudges. But with the occupation per tier, it's 45. So 45, 90, etc, etc. And then we've got the sack per tier, which is 25 per tier, all the way up to 5. And then raise per tier is all the way up to 5, so up to 250 total grudges. Next up, I want to discuss the historical settlements that are within the game. These are additional tiers in which can increase the amount of grudges that you will get as part of it. So we can see that we have historical settlement of legendary, which is 250 base, which is settlements like Caddock 8 Peaks with the underway network in it. We also have historical settlements holds, which is 100, which is kind of like a normal dwarven hold. And also historical settlement others is 50. For example, settlements like Ash Ridge Mountains is 57. And as you can see, Caddock Azul is being considered a legendary settlement because it's 672, which is continuously keep on scaling throughout the game. Next up, I think it's important to understand there's an actual modifier per culture. As you can see, when it comes to the elf actions, they have a modifier of 15% more grudges alongside the vampires as well. So if you go towards the vampire territory, you can see all of them have undead actions at the same time. But if you go towards factions that are, per se, more evil, we've got the Mortals of Chaos actions in there, and these guys get a 30% increase. So if it's a Chaos faction, if it's a Demon faction, they gain a 30% grudge bonus modifier. Hero actions also add grudges. On success, it is 25 grudges. On a failure, it is 10. And as you can see on screen, there are hero actions right here, and that continuously will keep scaling depending on how many hero actions that you do to those relevant factions. And to those that paid attention to the last screenshot, if factions are trespassing onto dwarven factions, they will gain a grudge as part of the trespassing. Alongside this one, if you raid, you get a 25 additional grudges on top of the 10 for trespassing. Grudges will scale depending on the campaign difficulty that you're playing on. So if you're playing on easy, expect lower grudges. If you're playing all the way to legendary, expect people to have a lot more grudges on top of their heads. So we now know that Imric has a 15% amplification to his grudges by being an elf. What he also gets, and so does everybody else, a 10% faction action, which basically means if, let's say Imric gets 400 grudges, 40 grudges will be amplified and placed onto each individual settlement that he takes, and it will be spread out between all the armies and all of the settlements. Next up is cultural actions of 3% of the total grudges get spread across. But with the greenskins, let's say Grimgor goes in, attacks a dwarf or does something mean, and he does, let's say, 300 grudges. That 300 grudges, so the 9 grudges he generated there, will be spread to every single greenskin across the map, which is why they wanted to create some kind of association type between these types of factions to make sure that it slowly adds more grudges to the areas that do not have dwarves within it. So when you move towards that location, obviously you have the ability to gain a lot of grudges as part of them removing the dwarves in that location. So we finally now have a working example because there's so many complicated things around it. We can see that Imric, we know, has a 15% additional modifier. So the values that were provided are before those amplifications. So let's say the 30 for attacking the army goes to 34 as part of the 15% additionals. So 34, 34 attacking here. Next up, as you can see within the game files, Imric is considering the combat power of these two armies of 84 and 92 accordingly, but as we know, we have to additionally add the 15%, so the 92 goes to 106, and the 84 goes to 97. And he's occupied a tier 1 settlement, so that adds an additional 51. And since we know the AI always sack settlements before they take them, add additional 28, which is leaving us at 350 total grudges, but we're forgetting the faction actions, so what we need to do is go ahead and add on the 10% to that. And so we've got roughly around the area of the acts of aggressions, because there are certain variables in which can change the numbers here and there, but that is fundamentally how they're calculating the way that the grudges work. And due to the fact that Imric did bad things against the dwarves, you can see that there's elf actions of 29 across the board for all the high elves around this area because of what Imric did, which is what's going to continuously keep scaling the grudges. So armed with this information, anybody that's going to attack a dwarven faction, whether it be in a minor faction like Karak Azul, is going to rapidly scale up their amount of grudges that they have across their own factions as well. So keep this in mind. So when you're playing as Thorgrim and you're playing as Ungrim, your best interest is to move towards the Karak 8 Peaks area because of how many times they're going to be attacking minor settlement dwarves like Karak Azul. And over here, obviously, since Clan Helheim is going to be attacked by Imric, so all of these guys will generate a ton of grudges, so to 100% your Age of Reckoning, make sure to start moving towards this direction, specific to Ungrim and Thorgrim. And so armed with information, I hope you have much better campaigns. Thank you so very much for watching. I tried my best to digest this information as easy as possible for people to understand, but obviously I'm still learning, and I know that your time is very important, so I will try and respect it wherever possible by making the videos as short as I can be. Thank you so very much for watching. Have a wonderful day. Make sure to check out my other content on the screen now.